My name is Bob Munson. I'm the president of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Our mission is to ensure the future of elk, other wildlife, and their habitat. I want to thank you if you're a member of this great organization, and if you're not, do join us. But most importantly, sit back and enjoy this great video. I trust you'll learn from it. Thank you.
Names such as Jim Zumbo, White Shoe, Wayne Carlton, Bill Krenz, and Mike Lipinski read like a who's who of elk hunting. Never before have such names been brought together on one video to share their techniques and secrets for elk hunting success.
The specifics of
Dwight Shue, senior editor of Bowhunter magazine and noted book author, will discuss scouting tactics.
Exactly where you'll find wall.
Wayne Carlton, owner of Wayne Carlton's Calls, will explain new methods of calling in elk. Mike Lipinski, well known for his books and videos on elk hunting, will show how to set up for an incoming bull. Bill Krenz, Vice President of Marketing for Bear Archery, will cover proper hunting equipment.
And I can get my gun
And
up
who
real
better
quick,
to cover the sport of rifle hunting
like
for
this,
elk than Jim
and
Zumbo,
be pretty
one of the
steady.
most
But
respected
that's only for a
authorities on the
fairly
subject
close
of
shot.
elk and elk hunting.
Every time.
With well over 100 elk kills to their credit, these men have proven that their tactics and techniques work. Dwight Shue has taken big bulls from the desert country of Arizona to the high mountains of Montana. Dwight explains how proper scouting is important to any productive elk hunt.
We're going to talk about elk scouting today, and I think that's probably the most important aspect of killing elk. You can talk about calling and knowledge of the elk themselves, but knowing where they live is the real starting point. And it really doesn't matter if you live in elk country. If you live back in Pennsylvania or New York or someplace, you can hunt just as effectively as somebody that lives here in Idaho or Montana, because there are certain elements and aspects of elk country that are very identifiable. And if you learn what those are, then you can expect to come into a piece of country, cold turkey, never have been there before, and find elk right away. So I think you can come out and hunt with confidence no matter where you live. A little bit how you'd scout maybe depends on where you live. If you live in an elk state, of course, you can go out and you can learn the specifics of each elk herd. You can learn the migration patterns and the travel corridors and exactly where you'll find wallows and rub trees and different types of elk sign. But if you live out of state, don't be discouraged, because really what you need to know is not the specifics of where you will find an elk at a given time, but what you need to know is the principles, the basic needs of elk. And if you know what those needs are, then you can identify those needs on a map, or when you arrive in the country, you'll see them and you'll know that that's a place that would hold elk. So rather than knowing exactly where the elk are living at a given minute, what you need to know is the type of terrain, the type of cover, the type of habitat that will attract elk. And most of my elk hunting over the past 25 years has been in country where I have never been before. In most situations, I have not had time to scout the areas that I've hunted, so I come into them not knowing the area, and yet I've had very, very good success hunting areas for the first time, and it's primarily a matter of knowing what to look for when I get there. So those are the kind of things that we want to talk about, is what do you look for when you come into a new piece of elk country so that you can find elk your first time there. You don't have to be an expert on a piece of country to find elk. You just have to know what to look for. One thing to keep in mind about elk is that they live in a variety of habitats. You often get this picture of the classic high mountain, Rocky Mountain type wilderness hunt on pack string, and that's certainly a great elk hunt, but there's a great diversity of elk hunting opportunities out there, from the high Rockies to the coastal forests of Oregon to the southwest and the deserts. And so you can find elk in a lot of different kinds of habitat, but the principles are the same no matter where you hunt. So we'll go into some of the different principles for each one of these types of habitats. One thing I'd like to say about elk hunting is that it's no magic or science to it. Anybody can do it, and it's just a matter of learning these principles and knowing which kind of country you're in. Now, if you're in the southwestern deserts like this, there are certain things that you're going to look for first, and number one would be water, because in the dry southwest, if you're in New Mexico or Arizona, say southern Colorado, parts of eastern Oregon and southern Idaho, the country's very dry, and the elk are primarily tied to water sources for drinking water. So those are the starting points. You find the stock tanks or the seep springs or the little creeks, and you know that the elk are going to be centered on those areas. Those are going to be the focal points of their activities, because they do have to have drinking water. So that would be the place that you would start. And that's where I start my scouting. When I come into a new area, a dry desert type elk country, I start my scouting by searching out the water sources. Another scarce commodity in desert country, of course, is cover. If you're over in the rainforests in Oregon, elk have cover everywhere, and so cover is not a critical thing that you look for. But if you're in the desert like this, now if you look here, you got a lot of open country, a lot of open sagebrush, and that's where the elk will feed at night. But they have to have cover during the day where they can get out of the direct sunlight. They have to have shade. Elk do not like direct sunlight, and they have to have cover from predation, primarily hunters. And so you're always going to look for those cover pockets in desert country. Another thing that I look for, regardless of whether I'm hunting in the mountains or in the desert, is changes in terrain. Now, if you're up in the high mountains, you look for flat spots, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. But if you're in desert country, most of the country is actually flatter, so what you're looking for there is steeper areas. So I look for those contrasts in terrain, and if it's generally flat country like you can see in the background here, most of the country is flat. Well, the elk will feed out onto those flats at night, and then during the day they're going to come up into the steeper areas. So ideal elk habitat in flatter desert country has some steep little peaks or some steep ridges, and you can bet that that's going to be the bedding area during the day, because the elk will get up there where the thermals are blowing up to them, they can see out, and they have a safe bedding place. So you always look for those changes in terrain, and in the desert country it's generally going to be a steep place where they'll bed during the day. But these are things that you can know well ahead of time. You do not have to know your country intimately. In fact, it gripes me a little bit when some people make it sound like you have to live there and know every elk personally to have a good elk hunt. You do not have. The things I've talked about, the water, the cover, the terrain changes, the refuge areas, those are things that you can study and learn sitting at your kitchen table at home. You can use your maps. I do a lot of hunting right on my map, and I scout on my map before I leave home. I look for those types of places so that when I arrive in a new area, I know exactly the places I'm going to look at when I get there, and I will start going from one place to the other, and that's when I start evaluating for elk sign and determining if the elk are there. But I've started my scouting, and I've done 80% of my scouting on my map before I've ever left home, and that to me is the real secret for good elk hunting right there. Boy, this looks like a good place right in here. Lots of good green grass, some fresh sign in here, good cover around on this, above this aspen grove here in that ridge. But if I'm hunting mountain country, this is the kind of place I'd look for. And probably the first thing I look for in the high mountains, the northern Rockies, would be green areas. Elk are pretty much like cattle, and they're grazers, and if they can find good grassy meadows, that's where they're going to be feeding. If there's no good grass like this, then they're going to be browsers and they will feed on brush. So I look either first for the green grassy areas or for the brushy browse areas, and those feeding areas are going to be the focal point for elk activity in the high mountain type of areas. Generally in desert areas, feed is almost everywhere. There'll be expansive grasslands, and the elk can feed anywhere. What really is critical there is the water and the cover. And the thing about it in the desert is that those are a long ways apart, so the elk may travel 3, 4, 5 miles between feed, water, and their bedding areas, whereas in the mountains most things are a lot closer together. But you get into the high mountain forests and they're more sterile, and the feed is quite limited. So the first thing that you would look for generally in the high mountains is those feed areas, the green meadows or the brushy patches where the elk will be feeding. And that's the real center of activity in the mountain type areas. Of course, even in the high mountains, water is very, very important, but as you can hear, there's a stream flowing right behind me. Drinking water is not a limitation in the high mountains. So the kind of water you're looking for there is basically wallowing water if we're talking about hunting during the rut. The bulls need places to wallow. So what I look for are green meadows, wet meadows, or little seeping springs where those bulls can wallow during the rut. So I find first the feed areas, knowing that's the center of activity where the most elk will be. Then I start looking for those water places, and then of course I want good cover in proximity, and usually in the high mountains there will be forest around, so there's usually a lot of cover. But I look for those three things together. I look for the feed, I look for the wallowing type water areas, and I look for the surrounding cover. And usually I can find that in basins or little benches. And again, just like in the Southwest, I would use my maps, and these are the kind of places that I look for, primarily basins and benches, because a basin will have a little flat place where a spring might be coming up. There will be good feed around that spring, and then there's surrounding cover. So most basins are very, very good for elk cover. Also, in the high mountains, I talked about contrasts in terrain, and in the desert, if it's flat, the contrast would be a high point or a butte. In the mountains, it's mostly steep, so the contrast would be a flat spot. So I look for benches. If there's a ridge where it's very, very steep and the contour lines are real close together, then I look for a place where those contour lines are farther apart. That indicates a little flat bench, like I'm on right here. There's steep surrounding country here, and then the contour lines are farther apart at this particular place. There's a little bench with some grass on it and these aspen trees, and it's just an ideal place for elk. Again, as I've said, you can do all your scouting at home on a map, and one of the primary things you would look for not only are little benches like I've talked about, but are basins. And in the high mountains, a basin is probably the best indicator of elk habitat because it'll have feed, water, and cover right together. And so what I look for is a surrounding high bowl like this where the terrain lines are real close together, and then it flattens out a little bit. You can see here the contour lines are quite a ways apart. And then you've got a small pond in here with a lake running out. So you know that this is a wet, marshy area up in there, and there will be some springs and meadows around in there. And then, of course, where the trees are, you have good cover. So that basin has feed, water, and cover right there in one small area. You can bet that that kind of a place will hold elk. So what I try to do is locate a number of those types of places on my map before I ever leave home. Then I know right where I'm going to start hunting when I get there. So when I get to an area, what I do is I pretty much take off cover and ground, particularly if I arrive before the season opens. And if I can, I'll try to arrive 2 or 3 days prior to the season to give myself a little time to look around. I might do a little bit of calling. If I can hear a bull, that's one way to scout. But I certainly don't try to call them in. If I can hear them, I just leave them alone and go on. And I can locate bulls that way. I use my binoculars a lot. Now, you always carry binoculars when I'm elk hunting. I like these 6-power binoculars. They're strong enough to see an elk at a long distance. They gather a lot of light. And I can see elk at 3 miles across a canyon with these. And that's another way of scouting. I'll do a lot of glassing, so that if I know there's one of these good basins that I've located across there, I'll glass it early in the morning or late in the evening, and I can oftentimes locate an elk herd that way. But I also do a lot of hiking, and I'll pick out several of these areas that I found on my maps, and I'll go from one to the next and try to evaluate the sign there. And even if an area looks really great to me, if I don't see some fresh sign, I'm not going to spend much time hunting there. If I don't see fresh tracks, if I don't see some fresh droppings, I won't hunt there. And if I'm seeing some fresh tracks that indicate that elk are in there right now, then I start searching for wallows and rub trees. And those are going to tell me that the bulls are in there, because if it's in rut, the bulls are in rut. If it's sometime in September, you can bet the bulls are making rub trees, and they're going to be making some wallows. And so I start searching for that sign then. So that's how I determine whether I'm going to hunt a particular basin or a particular bench, just based on the sign that's there. If there's no fresh sign there, I don't waste time there. I keep moving around till I find those key points where the elk are right now. One important point that I think a lot of people overlook in terms of scouting and hunting is going prepared to do it well. And if you're concerned about getting back to camp and getting lost and those types of things, you're never going to scout or hunt effectively. One thing I always do is carry a good day pack with me. This is a pack that I personally designed. It's called the Dwight Shoe Hunting Pack. It's made by Peak One, Coleman Peak One, and it allows me to carry all the gear that I need during the day to do an effective job of scouting. I don't have to worry about getting back to camp at dark, and I don't have to worry about getting out before daylight. I can hunt or scout all day long, and I can carry all the equipment that I need here. So I'm never hunting scared. I'm always confident that I'm capable of surviving out there, and that I have all the gear that I need to survive under any circumstances. I think that's a very, very important part of elk scouting and elk hunting. You've got to go prepared. And I think more hunts are ruined not because people don't know how to hunt elk or find elk, but because the conditions just end their hunt for them. So go prepared for it. Do you need a guide to hunt elk? Well, if you have absolutely no experience hunting and you don't have a lot of time, then I think maybe hiring a guide is not a bad idea. But if you're physically prepared, you come prepared with good equipment like I've talked about, and you come prepared with the knowledge of the elk that we've talked about, and finding these key points for scouting, you can hunt elk as well on your own as you can with a guide. And the real fun of elk hunting, in my opinion, is the challenge of finding them on your own and taking that bull. Hey, listen, I think there's some elk just down the ridge here. I got to go look for them. Thank you.
Wayne Carlton has harvested more than 20 elk with bow and arrow. Wayne will discuss how different calls are used.
I use a lot of different sounds on one bull, sometimes 3 or 4 different sounds. I want to do whatever it takes to make those elk get close. I always try to get on the same elevation with the elk I'm calling to, but in using this real aggressive calling technique, I've had them come up the hill and come down the hill. And as you can see, that bull got pretty close. And he's getting a little closer. When you get a bull in like that and you don't want to take him, just play with him by calling. You'll learn an awful lot about the critters that you're hunting simply by being close to them. When you're calling, that's a good way to be close. I use the cow call, the diaphragm cow call. And now I'm bugling. Using the mega grunt tube. But there's still no answer. So I'm not really sure where he's at. I don't know if he's still coming or if he's going. So you try this high-pitched cow call. And that'll tell you right quick what he's doing. He's getting closer and closer. Well, let's go down to northern New Mexico. And this is in September. And we're actually trying to call a bear in. But we see the elk up on a ridge, and I start calling. Again, using those high-pitched calls. And the elk start coming. Now again, these are nice bulls, especially if you're a bow hunter. These are real nice bulls. But if you're after that great big herd bull, these are the kind of bulls you have to pass up. And when they add the bugles and the chuckles to the cow calls that you're doing, all that does is add fuel to the fire. And sometimes that's what it takes to get that big bull going. It's a lot of excitement, and that's what I'm trying to create. As much excitement as possible, simply by calling and raking trees and getting the other animals to answer back. Again, it adds fuel to the fire. And they'll sure pinpoint you whenever you keep calling, and they're right in front of you. They know exactly where you're at. Anything that you can do in calling, using this aggressive type call, to make the bulls get like that, your chances increase in getting that animal in. The best rule of thumb is when an animal's coming towards you, don't call or call very little, just enough to keep him coming. Now I'm hunting with Wayne Pearson here from the Ultimate Outdoors, and Wayne has pulled just at the right time because the bull is behind the vegetation, he's coming around. But down in that part of the country, it's hard to be part of the vegetation, and when you're not part of the vegetation, they know you're a booger man and they'll see you. Now this is like 1 o'clock during the day. It's hot. The sun is real bright. You can see that from looking at the foliage. But you just slip through that stuff, and finally that bull's going to slip back to you. In other words, you created enough excitement that you got him up out of his bed, and he's going to come and see what's going on. When you can't see the elk, you have no idea what they're doing, whether they're laying down, standing up, raking a tree, or whatever. So since you can't see them, you have to assume that you have to stimulate them, and that's where the calls and walking and moving get you in position for that shot. Cows make a lot of different sounds, and if you can learn to imitate those sounds, and if you can create the reaction that you want to create at the time you're trying to call, well then that's when you start calling some good bulls in. For instance, a generic cow call, one that you hear a lot of, is something like this. But if that cow is lost and is trying to get back to the herd, it's more of a desperate sound like this. But now you take those same cow sounds and put some movement in them, like where the cows are fighting with each other. That's what I'm finding out is really effective in calling bulls in. Now if you're using a diaphragm, it's like this. And you notice I'm bobbing my head, I'm kind of shaking my chest. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create some action in that call. A diaphragm does it pretty good, and you don't have to use your hands, but the call that does it the best is the little plastic reed cow call. We call it the fighting cow call because that's where I learned the technique from, is just watching cows fight and listening to what they're doing, and then trying to imitate that during the rut when I'm trying to call a good bull in. So to use this call, and the sound that you'll hear how it sounds a lot different than a diaphragm, the way you use it is you're biting down the tip of the reed about 3/8 of an inch in from the end of it. You're biting in on that. You want a high pitch E sound, and then from that point you can take that call anywhere you want to go, like this. Put some life in the call, put some action in it, and that's when you start getting the action from the bull. Now something else that we've added that I have found that's really helpful out in the woods, we take our normal grunt cue and blow through it. Makes a pretty good sounding bugle, but just add this megaphone to the end of it. It just slips right inside the grunt cue. Now what that does, what the megaphone does, it gives that call a little deeper sound, a richer sound, kind of like a more original sound. So when you're working a big bull, sometimes that's what they want to hear. They don't want to hear that satellite bull. They're trying to hear a big bull. Now a trick that I've learned in using this call, instead of blowing through this end, when the bull starts coming in and you're trying to make him think you're somewhere else, just turn that sucker around and blow through the big end. It kind of really throws that sound around so that animal never knows exactly where you're at. Just kind of a little tip, something you learn out in the woods. You know, it's something to see a great big old bull that's about 200 yards away, and it's just no way to get any closer. So I just lay every call on him I can to try to get him aggravated enough that maybe, just maybe, he'll come over. And if you do have to move on an animal, if you are trying to get closer, look at their head, and if it's down, that's when you want to move, but you want to move extremely slow. And then when you set up, you want to set up next to an object, a tree or brush or something. And if I see a bull like this raking a tree, I don't give him the option of doing it in peace and quiet. I'm going to bugle at him. I'm going to cow call to him. I'm going to do anything I can to get that sucker cranked up. As you can see, this is a good bull. But he's still too far away to do any good. But at least he is moving in my direction. And we may just get lucky. There's only one problem when you're trying to do all this calling with aggressive style. Sometimes the little guys want to come in and watch what's going on. And when they point you like a bird dog, and that big bull walks in behind them, you can forget it. You're not going to get that bull. One of the things that I have noticed is that when a bull starts getting close, he gets quieter and quieter. Sometimes they bugle a lot, but I'd say 90% of the time when that bull starts slipping in like this, he's going to be looking, he's going to be listening, and he's going to be trying to spot you before you spot him. Now if you set up, then you get to watch him come instead of him watching you come. See, I'm just throwing that sound around. I'm trying to make him try to figure out where I'm at. See, we got this open country, and I can't get any closer to him. So I'm just trying to do enough calling to try to get that bull to come on in and give me a shot. Actually, he's not too far away, but every time he stops, there's always a tree in the way. And he's interested, but he just doesn't want to come all the way. It's like one of those hide and seek deals. I'm going to hide from you and look for you. So you just kind of keep throwing those calls. First he was to our right, now he's going to our left. If you look at that grass, that's the way the wind's blowing. And he's probably going to try to come around and get in the wind. See, I used the diaphragm cow call there. He looked back at me, but he wants to walk away. You see what that high pitch does? He's much more reactive to that. He bugled to me, so I just give it right back to him. He's still just easing off to our left. I still don't have a shot. So the only option you got is to keep calling. He's going in the right direction now. He's heading our way. Just so you know, when you're looking at this, we've shortened this up by a bunch. We actually had almost 14 minutes of video footage of this elk coming in, going out, coming in and going out, until finally he came close enough that I could get a shot. And a lot of it had to do with that high-pitch cow call. I need for him to take about one more step. That's a step I need right there. That's 42 yards. That's about the furthest I'll shoot an elk. Open country, but I had a good shot. Nothing between me and the bull. On this particular bull, I think I was on him about 3 or 4 times. But when he came in the first time, the cows messed us up. And then I tried to get closer to him, and I never could get close enough to get a shot, and had actually given up. I was going back to the mules, and I heard him bugle. So I says, I'm going to try this bull one more time. And again, we're hunting some pretty thick country, but where I live in Colorado, sometimes that's where the good bulls are at. So that's where I'm at. I know he's there. I can hear the limbs cracking, then all of a sudden I see his antlers. So now it's that typical standoff. Who's going to win this? He's trying to see me. I can see him, but I don't have a shot. One of the techniques I like when they're this close is don't say anything. Let them look for you. Sometimes they'll turn around real slow and it'll give you a shot. So I'm trying to let him turn. When he turns, I'm going to go full draw. I really have to be careful about what I'm shooting through here so I don't hit something. And as he turns, the only problem is he turns too fast, and I couldn't get a good line on him to see where I wanted to shoot. But if you know how to use a diaphragm call and bugle, then you have a second opportunity. He's down. He's down for good. You know, I think the best way to get good bulls in, again, is to be able to get close to them. This bull was right over a hill, so we just slipped up as close as we could get and started doing those calls. And here he comes. Of course, every bull thinks he's the biggest, baddest hombre there. And when they come in, they take it out on some poor little old pine tree that wasn't bothering anybody. But if you're a hunter and you don't have that shot, you could take a side step and get a shot. Or you could do some calls away from the bull, make him think you're somewhere else, and get him to come even closer. I think the biggest thing that keeps people from getting that animal, especially when you're elk hunting, is the persistence and the determination to go down in that canyon, to go to that next hill, to go up to that ridge, and to know they're on the other side. A lot of folks, when they're out there hunting, they just give up right during the middle of the hunt. When you're elk hunting, you better be tough, and you gotta think tough.
Mike Lipinski has harvested 30 elk with bow and arrow. His books, High Pressure Elk Hunting and Radical Elk Hunting Strategies, have revolutionized the sport of elk hunting. Mike will discuss how to set up for an encounter with an oncoming bull elk.
Through proper scouting, you can find out where the elk are, where the bulls are rutting. Using the proper equipment, you'll know when you hit that bull, he's going to go down. Using all the right calls, you won't make any mistakes calling in the bulls. There's one more area of expertise that's of critical importance, and that's the setup. Because the setup is the last thing you're going to have to be concerned with before you kill that bull. Believe me, you can do everything right. Equipment, scouting, make the right calls, get that bull coming in. If you don't have the setup right, you'll blow everything. This is an area of great frustration for most bow hunters. They overlook the setup. They think that's all I got to do is have the bull coming in, and it's all over with. And this is what happened. Bull's gone. What happened? What happened? It's a lot more complicated than that, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about.
The best way for us to learn is from our mistakes. Let me show you one of my failures to show you that even experts make mistakes. I got into this Oregon bull a couple of years ago, and I was really anxious to get a shot at him, but I couldn't understand why he wouldn't come in any closer. Finally, I got a decent shot at him, but it really wasn't the one I wanted. I was really frustrated by that encounter, and it wasn't until afterwards that I discovered my mistake.
Right underneath him. I'm going to show you a fatal mistake I made so that you won't do the same dumb thing I did. And this will beat you every time. See those 3 trees over there? They're just blown down dead trees, snags. They're running up and down the hill. When I set up right back here. Well, that elk, he was on my left side over here. I mean, he couldn't get across here. I mean, even an elk couldn't jump that. So he stayed above him. Went back and forth and back and forth. And I'm sitting here, I couldn't hardly get a shot at him. There's a screen of trees, even though a lot of times he was 25, 30 yards. I couldn't see him. Finally, I took that one shot. What I should have done, looked at that and right up to this big red fir up here, about 30 yards, and then I'd have shot him at 20 yards when he went by. So, when you hear him, like 70, 80 yards away, you bugle, if there's enough cover, scoot forward 20 yards or something to the next available cover. And see, he thinks you're still back there 70, 80 yards. He comes forward a little bit and he's going to work in front of you and show off, and you'll be right there for him. That's mistake number 2 I made. I should have ran up there and I should have watched out for these trees here. Remember that. Set up so that when that bull comes right in or else back and forth, you've got the shooting lanes. You pick the ambush site. Don't let him. I let him pick the ambush site and I lost. In the classic situation where you've got a rut-crazed bull elk coming in from 400 yards away, setup is still critical because you've got to set yourself up where that bull is going to come by at 20 yards away. Now let's just say that bull is crazy. He's coming through here. And you say, oh, great, here's a bush. I'm going to set myself up. That bull's going to see you sticking out just like a sore thumb. He wants to come in through here, and he's going to see anything foreign. Myself, if I knew that bull was coming in here, I'd sneak right up here and kind of get out of the way, out of the travel way, and I'm in these aspens, and I'm just kind of like another aspen. Or, and I'll tell you, experienced bow hunters especially do this, drop down to a knee. Look, I've dropped my profile by a half doing this. Done a lot of target practice shooting from my knee. Look at this bull, it's coming by. Whew, he never saw me. It's a perfect situation. This is the basics of the setup. Get out of his traveled way, but stay close.
Here's a good example of a classic come-in. This Colorado bull was 250 yards away, and it was obvious that my viewing had him worked up. You can see the inherent problem of this type of encounter. This bull is so far away that you have no way of knowing if he'll pass by within range. When a bull starts coming in like this, a smart bow hunter should start adjusting his position by moving forward or left or right to an ambush spot where you can get close enough for a shot.
Here he comes. Here he comes.
If you're willing to adjust your classic setup position, this is the way you're going to end up.
Oh, wow. Of course, now, we don't live in a perfect world. And you just don't get that many those classic come-ins where that bull's coming from 400 or 500 yards away and he's crazy. Usually you got to go after him. When you go after them, your movement, you have movement. So you can be seen by the bull, so you have to really be careful. Every time now, I said that bush is not good for the classic setup. That's true. But when I'm moving forward, trying to find that bull, trying to encounter him, you don't stop like this. He can see you. When I go forward, I'll always go like this. That way, if he should turn and come back, I'm hidden behind the bush. Now, let me show you a situation where things weren't perfect. The bull was moving away from me, but I just kept on pushing him until he finally turned, come right back after me. I was so experienced with this setup. Every time I move forward, as soon as I pulled up to him, I got right behind the bush and he turned and came back for me. Let's watch and see what happens when you have the right setup. take one more step. It's like he's about 25 yards. His chest was right behind that small tree there. He just had to take one more step. The wind was really squirrely, but that was really close for early season. This is the situation about setup. It's getting dark. You can see the sun going down. I had nowhere to go in here. It's a real blow down on cliffs here, so I come up ahead and I confronted him right in his back door. He was moving away from me until I got in here and squealed at him. Boy, then he just turned right and come right back in. Setup. Aggressive setup. You sit back there 400, 500, 600 yards, you're going to get 1 out of 50 elk that'll come that far. But if you go in their back door, you go just like this. Wind beat me on that one, but it wasn't the setup. The setup was perfect. Talk about problems. Early in the rut, you get these bulls coming in silently. Now, you go chasing them like I did on that last hunt. You know, you have time to set up. You got the classic coming in, you can get set up. What happens when they come in silently? Right out in the open. Now, this area here doesn't look very open. But if I was coming in here and suddenly a silent bull all of a sudden shows up, this looks fairly open, like, oh, I'm really in trouble. But we got these two trees here, and when you get caught out like that, just slowly drop to a knee, and believe it or not, you're fairly well camouflaged here in these trees. I want to tell you about a hunt. It happened recently to me where not one, but two bulls came in. I had to worry about the right side of me and the left side of me all at the same time. I was, whew, whew. And let's look at that hunt, and you'll be able to see what happens when bulls come in silently. You've got to take what you can get.
It was early season, and I'd been bugling up this ridge all morning. Hadn't heard a darn thing. Then I thought I heard a branch snapping. So I stopped to listen. Every so often I heard a branch snap, so I thought, well, maybe I better knock an arrow, just in case. Well, I started cow-calling a little bit, not expecting anything, of course. Then I look up, and there's his bull, only 30 yards away, looking down at me. I thought, oh no, no place to hide, caught right out in the open. The only thing I had was a small sapling, so I eased over behind it. The bull was a little bit suspicious at first, but I started cow-calling. Finally, he must have figured I was nothing to worry about and started forward. He was a nice 5-point, and I decided to take him. It looked perfect. He only had to take one more step. Stop now. Oh! Finally, he turned back. Of course, I figured it was all over with, and that's when I got the surprise. There's not one bull, but two bulls. They fought. I could hear their antlers clacking. I just kept cow-calling, and that one bull kept looking back. So I thought, the way he's looking, maybe it's not over with yet. Problem was, he was watching me, but he also was worried about the other smaller bull moving in on the cows. He wasn't sure if he wanted it to come in, but he also didn't want the other bull coming in either. I took that opportunity to slip forward just a little bit more to get in a little bit better position. Kept cow-calling, hoping one of them would come forward. Finally, in my new position, one of the bulls kind of acted like he wanted to start coming forward. At the time, this looks good. Now the other bull is starting forward. And suddenly, I have to worry about a bull coming in on the right side of the bush and a bull coming in on the left side of the bush. Finally, one of the bulls trotted ahead, and it looked like I'd get a good shot. But I still didn't know which bull it was.
Just too small. Couldn't get the big one to give me a good shot. Got a good shot at the smaller one, but I had to pass him up. A little bit too small for me. It was a lot of fun though. The one thing that's really important is proper camouflage in a hunt. Whether you're out there in the open or setting up. And the problem is when you get caught in a situation like open lodgepole and there's nowhere really to hide, proper camouflage is really important. If you're going to walk around there with a green camouflage that makes you look like a blob, you're going to stand out. I use camouflage that breaks up greens, browns, tans. I can virtually go anywhere and stand and blend in. This hunt I'm going to tell you about, open lodgepole, got a bull bugling coming in, absolutely nowhere to set up, no bushes, no nothing. I just saw the end of a log. I moved to the end of a log where I thought the bull would be coming by, and I just kneeled down, and because of my camouflage, that bull came by and looked right through me. Praise the Lord. Look at this. Beautiful. Oh, what a magnificent animal. Oh, a 5-point. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Oh. This is about my 30th bull elk, but I'll tell you something. It's just like my first one. That blow down lodgepole ridge, I thought, this is a waste of time. I'm on the wrong ridge. I'll give it a try anyway. Hey, you can't kill one if you're not out there. Just give one toot, and he was only up there 150 yards. Boy, come. I could see him a little bit, so I got ready, and when I bugled, he come right in there. And that's the problem with shooting elk when they're coming by. They walk fast. They walk 8, 10, 12 miles an hour. You don't get a chance to shoot at them. Always give a cow call. It'll stop them. You know, though we hunt them and go after them and kill them, we have to really respect and love these animals. A humane kill is the best way to show respect for the animals. I realize that there's always something out there. Things can't go right all the time, but if you wait for a shot, like that shot I had was about 10, 12 yards, you're not going to miss it, even if you shoot blind.
Bill Krenz has hunted elk throughout the West. Bill knows that proper hunting equipment is essential to any successful elk hunt. The ideal bow and equipment you choose for elk hunting should have one purpose: to kill an elk quickly and humanely. What type or brand you use isn't nearly as important as its performance. And with elk archery gear, performance is the name of the game. A mature bull elk is a big-boned, heavily muscled animal that may weigh upwards of 1,000 pounds. Your archery gear should be sufficient to penetrate deep enough into a bull's chest to puncture both lungs. Generally, a bow in the 60-pound pull range will get the job done. But more important than bow pull weight is proper tuning of the equipment. A properly tuned archery outfit will consist of a bow, arrows, and broadheads that are suited perfectly for each other. Long shots at elk should be avoided. Experienced elk hunters generally wait until an elk is within 40 yards before shooting, and they will pass up marginal shots. It is a fact that most bull elk are shot at a range of about 20 yards. No matter what type of bow, arrows, and broadheads you use, you still have to be able to hit an elk in the chest to kill it. Practice is critically important, but you should stay away from shooting at a bullseye once your archery equipment is tuned. One of the best ways to prepare for an actual elk encounter is to practice on an elk-sized target. Another way is to use the DART target system, which utilizes full-size video images of elk on a pressure-sensitive screen. When you shoot, the action stops and shows exactly where your arrow hit and where the elk's vital area was located. It's a lot of fun and great practice.
Perfect.
As Bill moves in on this big Montana bull, he is confident that his well-tuned archery outfit can get the job done if a clean killing shot is presented.
go. What? 40 yards? Whoa.
Jim Zumbo is one of the most respected sportsmen in America. He has harvested many elk with rifle and bow throughout the West. Jim talks about both early and late season rifle hunting for elk.
Did you hear that? That's what we're listening for. That is, of course, the scream of a wild bull elk. Now, if you're a rifle hunter, there's a couple things you need to remember about hunting during the bugle, and that is it may not happen in your state, primarily because many rifle seasons start middle of October, even as early as November 1st. That being the case, a lot of the bugling is over with. However, having said that, there are some states, wilderness areas in some states also, for example in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, where the rifle season opens in mid-September. There are also some limited entry units in many of the states where you're offered the opportunity of an early hunt with a rifle as well. It's important to remember that the bugle season basically ends around early October, possibly October 10th, October 15th. It kind of depends on the condition of the cows, how many of them are still in heat. I like to think that the peak of the bugle season is September 22nd, which is the first day of fall. I think a rule of thumb is to get as far away from those human traffic areas as you can when you're bugling. Don't bugle from a road or a trail or a two-track. Try to get into another drainage where other hunters aren't calling, because many times that will give elk a sense of security into thinking that that really is the real thing. What I like to do when I'm hunting elk anytime is to get up as high as possible early in the morning and look down. Look into those clear cuts, look into the parks, look into the meadows. Use those binoculars consistently. And don't just give a cursory look. Sit down or prop yourself up against a tree or a rock and actually use both hands, steady the binoculars, look intently at one particular spot with some concentration. You just don't want to glance around. Tell yourself there's elk there and look for those elk. If there's not, look in another area. Now, as you're doing this, the sun may be shifting, shadows are moving around, so you might want to go back to the place that you looked originally and again look for elk in that spot. Now, I think one of the biggest mistakes we make in elk hunting is not being out there early enough in the morning. You've got to be leaving camp in the dark. That means leaving camp long before shooting light, long before it starts getting light in the east. You want to be out there at your chosen location looking for elk when it's just starting to break day. You know that magic time that all of us hunters love? When it's just starting to get daylight, you start recognizing trees and shapes and mountains. That's when the elk are thinking about moving back in the timber. Elk are very nervous when the sun starts coming up. They feel vulnerable, especially when there's other people in the woods. So what you want to do is be there, get up as high as possible, and look for those elk. Now let's say you've spotted some elk and they're quite a ways away and you don't think you can get to those animals before they go back into the timber. What I suggest doing is stay right there and watch them and see where they go. Make plans that afternoon to be back there at that spot. Of course, you want to get within rifle range. Make sure you check the wind direction and wait for them to come back out of that location, which they probably will do if they haven't been disturbed by other hunters. And just sit there and wait. Now, late afternoon hunting has got a whole special set of problems with it. Because if you get an elk within an hour or within a half hour or within minutes of closing light, you've got a problem on your hands, because you've got to get that animal dressed, possibly in the dark. Not only get that chore done, you've got to get yourself out of there in the dark as well and find your way back to camp. So you want to be really careful when you're hunting late afternoon, because there's not only a logistical problem of getting that elk taken care of, but there's a problem of getting yourself out of the woods as well. You know, just because you're out there in a really good spot during the prime bugling time doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to hear elk for a lot of reasons. Not only because they might be bugle shy, it's just some days they just seem to have lockjaw. They just don't want to talk. I've had that happen in all kinds of places, the Selway Wilderness in Idaho, some wilderness areas in Wyoming and Montana, where you know there's elk around you, but they're just not talking. So one of the things I like to do, if you can, is most of the time elk are vocal at night. They are nocturnal in their vocalization and their communication. So if you can get into an area at night, I'm talking night, dark, possibly midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, or even maybe I've taken a sleeping bag into an area and just laid there and listened. What that lets you do, of course you can't hunt then, but you can listen. You can tell where elk are and pinpoint them for the morning's hunt. Many times when it starts getting late in the morning, that's when they shut up. They're just quiet. So by having that advantage of knowing where they are, then you can move closer. We're in typical elk country here on a national forest, which is where most elk hunting is done. And as you can see down below me here, there's a main access road here into the forest. And this is where most of the hunters are coming to hunt elk in this particular area. If I were to start hunting in this area, first of all, I'd be out of my truck long before daylight, and what I do is I get as far away from this road as possible. I like to do a lot of hiking. I consider maybe walking 5 miles a day as average. So what I do is I would dive off this hill, cross the creek in the bottom, and then head up that open slope and get on the back side of that. Notice that this open slope has a lot of grass. There's a nice park in there. This is a south-facing exposure. elk will probably be on this exposure during the night. But what they'll typically do is as soon as it starts getting light out, is they're going to go over the top into the north-facing exposure, which is going to be definitely much more heavily timbered. That's where their security is. Now also, over the top of this, there's going to be some little draws, and those draws are going to have timber in them. Many times elk like to stay in those draws as well. You know, as much as we hate to admit it, there's going to be times out there, if you hunt enough, where you're going to miss. Now, there's a lot of reasons why you can miss. Maybe you're walking up a mountain and you're out of breath, or maybe your target presents just a small area, or maybe the elk is running, or maybe your mind just snaps a little bit. You know, you've heard of buck fever. I'm amused by these articles where they say if you see a buck or a bull elk, why, just stay calm. Yeah, sure, stay calm. That's easy to write that, but it's not so easy when you're out there in the woods. But there is one reason why we shouldn't miss that is completely preventable. It should never happen. And that is by shooting offhand and not taking a rest. I'll shoot offhand if the elk is close, or a deer, whatever I'm happen to be hunting, and I can get my gun up real quick, use the sling like this, and be pretty steady. But that's only for a fairly close shot. Every time I have a shot that's anywhere from 100 yards or beyond, I will take some rest. For example, this tree here. Now, I would much rather risk spooking that animal by working my way to a tree than taking an iffy shot. So you come up to a tree like this, and it's just as simple as anything. Just put your hand on the tree, lay your rifle on your hand, and it's about as steady as it wants to get. You can use any kind of position, but just lean into it and lock in, and that rifle is steady. And of course, when you're hunting elk, there's almost trees everywhere you go, so there's really no excuse. You can use a log, you can use a stump, you can use a rock, you can lay down, you can sit down. Whatever you do, make sure you do take that rest, because nobody wants to wound an animal. And of course, nobody wants to miss an animal. So if you take care of this problem, this factor in shooting, chances are good you're going to get your elk. So if you're serious about it, if you want to tag that animal, get away from the main access areas, get up into that country where there's more timber, do some hiking, try to put yourself in a position and stay as high as possible. I like to do that. I like to walk the ridge lines. Many times I'll look down into a drainage that looks real thick. I'll go on down in there, wander through it, then come back up to the ridge and continue along. So elk hunting really is a lot of work if you're serious about it. You can make it any way you want it to be. You can make it easy by just basically road hunting, or you can get out there and beat the bush and find your bull. You know, not every hunt has to end up with a kill in order to be successful. I've been on many, many of those, but of course there have been some very memorable occasions when I've taken elk. One of my favorite hunts was in Idaho about 8 or 10 years ago. In fact, it was the first time that I ever had a video crew with me, and I did some bugling and got this elk.
Set up just about where I want to be. Got a great spot here. I got a tree behind me to break up my outline. Give him a bugle and see what happens. And get ready. Here he comes. I can see him moving through the trees. I can just see his legs on top of his antlers. I'm not going to bugle because I think he's going to head right out for that opening. Come on now. Not moving a bit. We got him.
It's a nice wide rack. You betcha. You know, oftentimes people ask me my favorite time to take a big bull elk. Well, without exception, that's as late in the year as possible. And there's a good reason for that, and it's this wonderful stuff falling out of the sky. Look at this. This is snow. And if an elk hunter ever prays, it's for snow. The reason I like late season elk hunting for the bigger bulls is because they have no choice that time of year. Consider this. Elk country is enormous range. Most of the elk are scattered on that high country, steep slopes, lots of timber most of the year. But when the snow accumulates in the high country, they have no choice but to come down into the lower elevations. They become much more accessible. They are closer to roads. They can be more easily seen in the snow, and for that reason, I am absolutely a fan in late season elk hunting. Now, there are some other reasons why I like to hunt late as well. Obviously, because there's white snow on the ground, you can see elk at a distance a lot easier. Also, you can track elk. You can find their tracks. You can take off after them. And how about the option of seeing elk during the day when you generally can't see them during the earlier seasons? And that's basically because they like to lay out in the sun when it's cold. That gives you the opportunity to get out there with your binoculars and look at distant elk and make a stalk on them. Now, one important thing is the first part of my statement was, if I want a big bull, I'll go late. Now, that's not to say I don't enjoy being in the woods when the elk are in the rut. That's a wonderful time, isn't it? September, the elk are bugling. It's a magical time. Frost on the trees, you're out there. It's just heavenly. But many of those biggest herd bulls, those dominant animals, they're not going to come to a call many times. They've already got their cows. So you can write them off. Some of the biggest bulls cannot be called. There are a lot of bulls that cannot be called. I'll repeat that, no matter what kind of call you're using, simply because they've already got their cows. They're out of there. But now, this time of year late, with the snow falling, they've got no choice. They've got to come down. And where are you? You're down there in the lower elevations, closer to roads. You don't have to get up there on horseback and go 150 miles. Exaggeration, of course, but you get what I mean. Anyway, give me my time to hunt elk. I'll go late every time. One of the obvious problems that you're going to have when you're hunting late in the season is snow, maybe lots of it, and cold, and maybe lots of that too. Now, the Rocky Mountain weather can be fickle any time in the fall. I've seen 20 inches of snow in September, but when you're hunting late, you're going to get more serious storms, and you're going to get a lot more cold. But it's not untypical to be out there hunting and it's 10 or 15 below. That is really cold, so you want to be prepared. Not only for survival reasons, but for health reasons or safety reasons, but for mental reasons. Because if you're out there and you're hunting and you're cold out, what are you going to want to do? Want to get back to a hot cup of coffee, get back to the truck, get back to camp. You're not hunting elk properly. Your concentration's gone. So what you want to do is be as comfortable as you can, again, for the mental thing, so that you're going to stay out there longer. So wear those heavy clothes. Now today, it's about 35 degrees, it's snowing lightly, and I know the weather forecast is calling for more of the same, so I'm not dressed very heavily today. This is just kind of a nice day to be out here. But if it was a lot colder, I'll guarantee I'll be wearing lots of wool. I'll be wearing some very good insulated boots. I'll have, other than my Stetson, I'll have a hat covering my ears, good gloves. You want to take care of your extremities. So when you're hunting late, think smart and think proper clothing. You want to make sure you're comfortable, and for sure you don't want to make any unnecessary journeys in the woods where you don't think you can get out in time before dark. That's simply foolishness. I'm tracking an elk here, and I'm fortunate here because this is a really big track. So there's no question in my mind that it's a bull. Now, a lot of people think that tracking an animal in the snow, especially elk, is easy because all you got to do is follow the track, and at some point he's going to be standing there looking at you in his tracks. Not always so. One thing to remember is most animals are very aware of what's happening behind them. They seem to know that that may be where danger comes from. So they're alert to something following them. What I like to do, if I can, I'm going to do it here, is I'm going to move up this slope because this track has been going basically straight for the last quarter mile. I'm going to go up this slope a little bit, maybe 100 yards, and just carefully parallel this track Therefore, I'm above the animal, and hopefully I can catch him walking on his track, and I'll be above him and I'll be able to see him. This is a tactic that I often use in areas like this that are not really heavily grown with timber, kind of sparsely covered. So I'm going to try that, and wish me luck. You know, the bottom line in tracking an elk in the snow is knowing how fresh the track is. You don't want to be following an elk track if it's 7 or 8 days old, obviously, right? Okay, how do you tell if the track is fresh? One of the things I like to look for is to consider the environment that the track is in, the overall environment. Get a good look at it. Is the track crisp? Is it crisp around the edges? Has some snow fallen in it? Has wind blown debris in it? Pine needles, any kinds of sticks or branches or bits of leaves. That all helps you tell if the track is really fresh. Another thing too, and this is obvious, and some hunters may hesitate to do this, you're following the track and there's some droppings. Take your gloves off, pick up the dropping. If the dropping is warm, once again, get ready, because that elk is right in front of you. But by the consistency of the dropping, if it's frozen or if it's just a little bit cool to the touch, can tell you a lot about that animal that you're tracking. So keep those tips in mind. And again, it's very important to know the timeline when you're following that elk. So give it your best and good luck. You know, a lot of hunters have problems walking through the timber during the daytime because they feel like they're making so much noise that they can never get up on elk. Here's one thing to remember. You are allowed to make noise in the elk woods, and do you know why? Because elk are noisy. But you can only make natural noise. You can't be talking. You should be wearing clothing that doesn't rustle. Avoid that cheap nylon that you can buy in stores. Wear softer clothing. Make sure you're not messing with something metallic like a sling on your gun or opening up a Velcro pocket. Let's do a little scenario. Let's say you're walking through the woods. We've got a bull and 4 cows lying out there. You're walking through the woods and you're making noise. Again, elk make noise, natural noise. But what you want to do is carry a cow call. Now there's a dozen manufacturers out there that make cow calls. It doesn't matter whose call you're using, but have it handy. Mine is around my neck like this. When I want it, I can blow on it. Now, as I'm walking through the woods, again, these elk are lying out there. I don't know they're there. I can't see them, but I'm blowing on my call. What does that do? That tells those elk that I am another elk or a couple of elk walking through the woods. Now, it's important to know that elk vocalize every day of the year, not just during the bugle season. They make this cow sound all the time, especially when they're walking. So what I'm doing is I am reassuring those elk that are lying there that I'm more elk walking to them. So what I like to do is when I'm walking through the woods, if I break through a branch or a blow down or swish through some brush, I'll blow the cow call. I like to blow it every 45 seconds, every minute or so. So now let's say we're advancing on these elk lying in the timber. They hear me coming. I'm blowing the cow call. They think I'm a cow. They're reassured. At some point in time, bingo, they got me. They know I'm there. They see me and they start running. Now what? You can stop almost every elk running away from you by using a cow call like this. Just take the call and blow it sharply. All it takes, and you will almost guaranteed stop those elk. Now all you're going to do is stop them. They know you're there, they see you, they're not going to run toward you. But what that does, it gives you an option of getting your rifle up, finding a rest, and of course it's a whole lot easier to hit an elk that's standing than one that's running away from you. You know, if you have the opportunity and the environment allows it, we're hunting in an environment here that's pretty neat. The snow is melting off the trees. It got real warm today, and you can hear it, you can see it falling. What that does, I think, is it kind of lessens the impact of the noise you're making through the woods. A lot of times elk can't hear you because of that noise. That's especially so if the wind is blowing, if it's snowing hard, or if it's raining. So take advantage of those rainy days. Hey folks, you can't get an elk sitting in a cabin or in the truck. Get out there in the woods and hunt during bad weather too. You may very well get the biggest bull of your life doing that. Well, I'm headed back to the truck. It seems that I was a victim of a little factor that we can never control in the elk woods or any woods, and that's the wind. While I was trailing that elk, the wind came around behind me and I found myself upwind. I kept walking. I knew it was going to happen, and sure enough, that elk, and I was pretty sure it was a bull, caught my scent, and I saw where he took off, and he's probably still going, so I'm going to give it up and try another day. But you know, folks, I've always believed that to have a good hunting trip, you don't have to kill something. You know, we are mighty, mighty fortunate to be able to be out here and enjoy this sport and just enjoy the great almighty out here and have fun. If we get an elk, that's a bonus. And if we don't get an elk, that's all right too, because it's a whole lot of fun being here away from the office and the rigors of society and civilization and just kind of doing our own thing, and that's what hunting's all about.
Their hunting bugles have challenged others of their kind across prairie stillness, hardwood forest, and mountain meadows of early America. For thousands of years, North American elk have been adapting to changing environments. But now, human development is threatening the critical habitat elk and other wildlife so desperately need. The Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation is dedicated to ensuring the future of elk, other wildlife, and their habitat. If you want to support the Elk Foundation, become a member or attend a local chapter banquet in your area. For more information about the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, look for Bugle Magazine at your newsstand or call 1-800-CALL-ELK. Portions of the Dwight Shue segment were taken from the video Elk Fever by Wilderness Sound Productions. Dwight has also designed a hunting pack to meet all the packing needs of the hunter. For more information, call or write to Younder. For more information about Dwight's books on mule deer and elk hunting, write to the following address. Wayne Carlton's segment was taken from the video Aggressive Elk Callin' by Wayne Carlton's Wild Country Videos. Anyone can make an elk call, but it's Carlton's high-pitched calls that call in bulls and sets them apart from the rest. For more information on Carlton's high-pitched cow calls and a lot of other hunting stuff, call or write to Wayne Carlton's Calls and Hunting Stuff. Portions of Mike Lipinski's segment were videoed with East Fork Outfitters, who specialize in both rifle and bow hunts in the heart of Montana's Anaconda-Pittler Wilderness area. For more information, call or write East Fork Outfitters. Mike has also written a new book titled High Pressure Elk Hunting. This book contains many secrets for hunting today's educated elk and covers many new and little-known hunting techniques that are sure to tip the odds in your favor. To order your copy, call or write to Stony Dale Press. Mike's other book, Radical Elk Hunting Strategies, which deals with secrets of calling elk in close, can be ordered by writing to Lipinski Publishing. Bill Krenz's hunting segments were taken from the video Legacy of Bull Mountain by Stony Wolf Productions. Portions of Jim Zumbo's segment were taken from the videos Hunting Bugling Elk and Late Season Elk Hunting with Jim Zumbo by Sportsman on Film. Jim has also written a new cookbook titled Amazing Venison Recipes, with over 200 recipes for deer, elk, moose, antelope, and other big game animals. This book places special emphasis on gamey, tasting venison, sharing with you some simple and easy techniques to make any cut of venison a gourmet delight. To order your personally autographed copy, call or write to Amazing Recipes. For additional reading information, Bob Robb also has a book titled Elk Hunting with the Experts. To purchase your autographed copy, send a check or money order to the following address: